Wednesday, June 22nd, 2016 is called to order. Flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public videotaping. The purpose of videotaping a meeting is for public information. The opinions expressed by any member of the public do not necessarily reflect the view or opinion of the Amherst Area School District Board of Directors and are solely that of the speaker. The Amherst Area School District Board of Directors hereby expressly disclaims any and all responsibility or liability for any false, defamatory, or slanderous statements expressed by the speaker. Any unauthorized rebroadcasting of any video, audio, or still image of the video recording of the meeting is strictly forbidden without the written permission of the Amherst Area School District Board of Directors. Roll call, please.
Mr. Angus?
Here.
Mrs. Fisher? Here. Mr. Keeper?
Here.
Mrs. Kehoe? Here. Mr. Greenwald? Mr.
Here.
Cowell?
Here.
Mrs. Locker? Here. Mrs. Mylan?
Here.
Mr. Sass?
Here.
Mrs. Smith? Here. All board members are present.
Sunshine Law, please.
Section 708 of the Sunshine Law permits agencies to hold executive sessions to discuss employment and personnel matters, labor relations and arbitration matters, purchase or lease of real estate up to the time an optional agreement is obtained, litigation or potential litigation, and other agency business which if discussed in public will violate lawful privilege or will violate confidentiality laws. The Board of School Directors held an executive session Wednesday, June 8, 2016 to discuss 1. Employment and personnel matters, 2. Salary schedule and labor relations.
Do we have any correspondence?
No correspondence.
Motion to accept or correct the minutes of meeting discussed meeting May 11, 2016, board meeting May 18, 2016.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept the treasurer's report dated May 2016.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Any amendments to the agenda, approval of the agenda?
Yes, Mr. President, we have several under the personnel section. First of all, under item 9, letter C, we need to remove the name of Nikki Fitzgerald for the speech therapist and replace it with the name of Marie Buck. Also, we have 3 additions to the agenda. We need to add item number 14, retirement rescinded. It is recommended that John Bullish's resignation due to retirement that was accepted by the board on April 20th, 2016 be rescinded and that Mr. Bullish be reinstated as a professional employee in the Amherst Area School District. We have item number 15, the junior ROTC instructor. It is recommended that the 1-year employment agreement for 2016 and 17 school term for the position of Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps with Master Sergeant Thomas G. Short III at a salary of $31,278.90 through December 31st, 2016, and the appropriate salary adjustment for the period between January 1st, 2017 and June 30th, 2017, which will be determined in accordance with the notification from the Marine Corps Training and Education Command regarding the annual increase to minimum instructor pay entitlements for the junior ROTC, and this is all done per our current agreement with the Marine Corps ROTC. And the last is item number 16. It's recommended that John Boover stay on with the district through the month of July as the Amherst Area High School Assistant Principal at his current salary rate of $250 per day. Mr. Boover will be assisting Ms. Zutsik, the high school principal, with the summer recreation program, the master scheduling of students and teachers. He will also engage in the Tyler technology training during the month of July and review grant opportunities. Those are all the changes.
Mr. President, I have one item. There will be a presentation by our bond counsel, Mr. Ditka, after the transportation presentation that relates to potential consideration of a bond issuance to be addressed in the existing agenda.
And I motion to accept those.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Keeper?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mr. Cowell?
Yes.
Mrs. Locker?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Unanimous, motion carries.
Now we're going to have a presentation by Brian Miller on the transportation part of the program. One thing I'd like to say, I'll let everybody explain the process. What we did here as a board, we came up with the criteria that we wanted our transportation person to have, whether it be cameras on a bus or only designated for Amber's use only, etc. The board came up with the criteria, and the information was distributed to Brian Miller, who then collected all the information and put together a spreadsheet on just exactly what it's going to cost by each provider. So now, Brian.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Just like Mr. Cowell said, I gathered the information and collected it. I have 3 slides to go over, one for roads transportation and Monarch student transportation. What RJ Roads Transit is offering, they are offering a 6 or 7 year contract with a consumer price index each year. The consumer price index can fluctuate. Currently it is 2.8%. Keep in mind that can rise or decrease. They are offering 49 buses that are solely used for Ambridge. So those buses will be, if an athletic run, activity run goes out to a different school or different site, it will be only used for Ambridge and no other school district. They are using TransFinder bus routing system, which is a newer system that has recently come out. It would allow community members to access online and view student information. They are also offering a 4-camera bus system where 4 cameras would be on each bus that would also have audio capabilities. For this is, again, it's a huge resource for our principals to have the video capability of seeing students if there are disciplinary issues. The driver pay will also increase $10 per day, which will put us the highest paid driver in Beaver County. The bottom line price is $2,158,061 for the first year. Currently, it's $2,275,070,494.80. That decrease is coming from the cut of buses. Currently, we operate 55 buses, and they're cutting down to 49. Moving on to Monarch Student Transportation. Monarch is offering a 7-year contract or a 10-year contract with a freeze if we use the 10 years at year 8. They are not using the consumer price index. They're going to stay with a 3% increase each year. So if the consumer price index goes up or goes down, they're still at 3%. Any fluctuation, it doesn't matter, they're still staying at 3%. They are using 48 buses to bus our Ambridge students, and they did a complete new routing system for the entire school district. That's why they were able to cut down to the 48 buses. They will also be using a 4-camera system. Again, as I said before, it's a great tool and great asset to have for our principals. The bus stops routing system that they use, I know they've been using it for a long time. It's a good software in terms of the routing, but the usability of it isn't the greatest. But it still is a solid system to use for bus routing. Instead of vans, they will be using 9-passenger school bus constructed vehicles. What's important like a school bus. Their bottom line price for this year, for the first year, will be $2,348,180.60. This also includes athletic runs, and also keep in mind there will be fuel savings due to one less bus in the fleet. I know everyone might have some issues seeing this, but what I did was I broke down the 7-year projection in cost for the entire district, what it would cost for our transportation contract through 7 years. I could not do apples to apples because they were offering a little bit different in terms of bus sizes, so what I did was just separated them into each of their own buses and then broke down the 3% increase for them each year. Going year to year, it breaks it down, and I added the $50,000 roughly what it costs for athletics every year for roads. At the end of the day, if you break it down, roads would end up costing the district $1,492,557 less than Monarch over a 7-year contract. That's basically it. When I did this spreadsheet, I just wanted to see what the actual difference was in cost. Again, each company is offering something a little bit different in terms of what they're running in their fleet. But just from a neutral overview of the overall impact on the budget, this is what it would come out to be.
Unless the board has,
Does the board have any questions or anything?
I do. Thank you very much, first, for your presentation and providing this to us. So, we've had roads for quite some time. Can you elaborate a little bit on our safety performance and we'll call them customer satisfaction, parental satisfaction?
The safety performance, I cannot speak to what their safety record was in the past. Currently this year we did not have any accidents with students on board that were at fault of roads. We did have parent complaints that come in from time to time. I will say that is typical of any transportation contract where you do get complaints that come in.
Brian, we did have one thing. We had one issue with the bus down in Conway.
Yes, we did have the one issue in Conway backing into a shelter of some sort. But other than that, that was the only accident that occurred this year.
And is either bus transportation company doing anything specifically to address special training of the drivers? Since you had mentioned that there are and has been some complaints. And have you also investigated anything with Monarch as far as customer service?
I have talked to both owners of each company, Mr. Rose and Mr. Schmidt. They are both very committed to enhancing driving training. I know Mr. Schmidt put together in his proposal what his driving training procedures are. And with the increase in salary with roads, I know they'll probably be getting some more drivers on, and their driving training will be increasing as well.
One last question, actually two. One, if we should choose in the future, before this 6 or 7 year contract is done, to redistrict, how would that impact this contract?
It can impact it in multiple ways. Number one, if you redistrict and you are cutting down buildings, you're obviously going to be cutting down routes. So we would ask that the contractor, if we don't need 48 buses or 49 buses, and we only need 45, yeah, we might have 49 in the contract, but they would have to agree to it that if we do redistrict and we're able to cut buses from year to year, same thing if we lose enrollment numbers, then we don't need 49 buses. That money we do not need to spend on 49 buses. That would be the biggest impact. And then also the impact of each company would have to work with the school district in the redistricting process and doing the rerouting and working with the input from the community too.
Yeah, one more, sorry. Technology. Technology's changing like crazy. You mentioned that each company has a bus routing system. Will this stay stagnant at this point? Are we going to continue looking at different technology? For example, and I'm not even sure who services Baden Academy, but they have something called Dragonfly, and they have a system set up with FedEx. We need to continue to look at different types of technology as it moves forward. Is there a plan for that? Will you be working with them?
I'm always looking at different routing systems. Like I said, TransFinder is the newest software that's out there that most school districts are switching to at this point. The thing that's nice about it is the usability, that you can have parents log in and view their students' information, which in turn can cut back on cost of mailing out letters every year. In terms of the camera systems and technology, that's always an asset to have with the school district. And it's important. We did, which was I think last year, we approved as a board the audio on the buses, which is tremendous too. And that also keeps the drivers accountable too, if you can see and hear them on the buses and hear what they're saying. But to answer the question, yes, I personally always try to keep up with technology because knowledge is power.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller, does this contract encompass all of our needs from pre-K through athletics? So it's a full service contract. The only thing that's really not in here are field trip runs, stuff like that are outside of the contract.
Yeah,
right.
And the one thing to keep in mind, we're estimating the athletic costs. So if all teams make playoffs, which is a good thing, then obviously the cost will go up.
Yes, there will be extra there. In terms of looking at the budget compared to our expenditures, the way I look at the budget right now, the one that was proposed and we put up for public inspection, there's approximately with pre-K allocation and also for general transportation, there's about $2,392,000 set aside for transportation.
That's correct.
If you do the math, the Monarchs with their numbers gives us about $43,000 left over. With roads, it gives us about $233,000. And actually, after listening to the presentation, you probably have to add another $50,000 on both of those because the athletic runs are already budgeted for per sport. Okay, so you're looking more at $280,000 and $93,000 differences. Why are we going to run such a large surplus if we go with roads in those line items for transportation? That's actually open to anybody too. I know Mr. Sass, you've worked on the budget too. Can you, if you have any input as well?
The budget was set before I had a chance to even look at it and not knowing what the contract is going to be. I think the figure was just put in there by the business manager at that point in time, and it was just never touched to this point.
Brian, just one question. Is there any difference in the age of the fleets that we're talking about here? Newer buses, older buses, anything of that nature?
There is in the contract, I can't remember without looking at it, but they do have to recycle the buses at a certain point, and obviously with Monarch coming in, if not 100% of the fleet, most of the fleet would be all new buses.
I have a couple questions. So the price of the fuel isn't built into either one of these, is it?
Correct. I did put approximate fuel savings into the Monarch.
Mr. Keever, your question, I think the budget includes the diesel fuel cost of the contract on an estimate. I think what the business office has done was taken the prior contract and inflated it, but it included all necessary fuel costs. I can't be certain of that, but that's mine.
We actually have line items for gas budgeted this year for $55,000 and diesel for $200,000.
Yeah,
So those are outside of that 2.3 to 2,392,000. my biggest question is, if you look at that difference, $283,000, that's a mill of taxes. I just need to know where that money is going, if we're going to save it, or if we're going to spend it on something else that the district requires. If we're going to save it, again, that's a mill of taxes.
I do have one other question. The driver pay increased $10 a day under the roads contract. That's not built into here either, is it?
It is added into the figure.
Okay, Brian. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
This brings us to the public comment.
Do you want to give us an agenda now?
Sorry, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Ditka. I'm in from the law firm of Dinsmore and Scholl. We have been bond counsel to Amherst Area School District since 2006. And what I have for you today is the resolution that's sitting at all of your places. We have worked through this with your solicitor. I've spoken at length with Mr. Sass. The resolution authorizes a bond issue to pay for costs at the junior-senior high school for some HVAC and energy saving measures, and also for the track and athletic field renovations. It is established as a not-to-exceed number. The number in the resolution is a number not to exceed $6 million. I think we're anticipating the Winchell Bar will be a lot closer to 5 or less. As I understand it, we just got quotes in on the athletic field and the track, and we already have the contract with Constellation, so we'll be able to pin down that number. But this authorizes the issuance of bonds in an amount necessary to pay just the cost of your project, nothing more, and to allow you to access the bond market, so we don't have to try and schedule another meeting in July or August. You are putting your president and secretary in the position of being able to sign the documents when we are ready to sell bonds. And when I say we, again, I do the legal work on your behalf, just like Mr. Webster. Your bonding company is Benning and Scattergood. They have been the underwriter here for some time. I think John McShane made a presentation to this group about the potential cost of the project. So the resolution does these things. It authorizes the issuance of bonds in an amount not to exceed $6 million. It fixes the maximum interest rate and redemption provisions. It establishes a sinking fund, appoints a sinking fund depository, and it authorizes me to do a filing on your behalf with the state. Remember, anytime a local government, school, county, municipality wants to borrow money, we have to go through a process with the Department of Community and Economic Development, and I will shepherd you through that. And it authorizes your officers, president, secretary, vice president, if necessary, to do all things necessary to close on the issue. So when we're ready to hit the market, we will, John McShane will go sell bonds, and we will look to the president and secretary to sign a contract that says we are agreeing to the bonds at this level in order to fund these projects. That's as short as I can make.
Could you explain the not to exceed provision and why it's so much higher than what we anticipate borrowing?
Sure. Mr. Sass asked me to explain the not to exceed nature of this. We've done this at this district before. If you are going to have an authorization of this type, in order for it to be approved by the state through that process in DCD, you have to set parameters where you have to know the amount of the bond issue. But we're not in a position yet to issue bonds. We have to go through the bond insurers and get quotes from them. We have to go through the rating agencies and get that process done. That will take several weeks. So rather than wait until that is done to come to your next meeting, we create a box. We create a box that is intentionally too big. That's why $6 million is more than we're planning to borrow, to make sure that when the bond issue is done, it fits inside. Because here's the key for the state. It's not just the aggregate amount. It's not just that we have to be under $6 million. If you look at the last page of the resolution, it's got a table in it. And you remember, bonds are sold with serial maturity, meaning some bonds mature in each year. In every year that we're going to mature bonds for the 10 years they're out there, we have to put a not to exceed number there. So the reason we built that box too big is if we had it right at 5 million, which is what we anticipate you borrowing, and in one of these years, we exceeded what's in this schedule by $5,000, we have to start over. So we built that box too large. But again, we're not going to borrow anything more than you need. So you're not going to be at risk for additional dollars or spending or anything like that. It is just that we have to create this parameter, this box that we cannot go over for purposes of the state. Again, there's several familiar faces here. We've done this at this district before.
Thank you.
I will hang around till the end in case more questions come up, but also because I need some signatures. Thank you.
At this time, anyone from the audience will come forward to comment on agenda items only. Each person will be allowed 3 minutes, and we can speak only once. This period for public comment prior to the standing committee reports will be limited to 1/2 hour. There will be no discussion during this time, but any board member or administrator desiring to address questions or concerns may do so at the conclusion of the committee reports. There will still be an opportunity for the audience to comment on any business relevant to the Amherst Area School District under old or new business at the end of the meeting. Does anybody want to come forward?
Hello, everyone. Jim Huar, 1472 Merriman Road. I have a couple questions. One of them being with the bond issue. In all the bond issues, was the bond issue put out for bid?
What do you mean by that?
Did you put it out so a lot of companies could bid on the bond?
We haven't gotten to that point yet. I mean,
I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, the bid hasn't been auctioned yet.
Okay. Now, the next question is, when you do that, do you know that the council that gets their fees, the bond council and whatever else, that this board can go and not just take what the people want on council, that the bonds can be bartered with, that they can, that this board could set fees of maybe $10,000 or $12,000, not $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 that each bond counsel and solicitor would make? Are we aware of that? Is that correct, sir?
In general, unless you have an existing agreement in place that would limit it, yes.
Okay. And because over the years being on municipal, the Amherst Borough and on the school board here, they were not put out and they were not bid out with certain fees attached, like limits. So we just make every board member aware of that that's a big savings to all of us as taxpayers in the school district. One other thing that I have is, with the issue on debating tax collectors, have we discussed or changed the liability of all the tax collectors from them being covered up to only $30,000 to raise that to higher amounts?
Yes, we have.
Okay, thank you. All right, those are the two things. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bob Mikowitz. I'm a 1979 graduate of Amherst High School and resident of Harmony Township. I wanted to address the board to express my concerns over the upcoming proposed budget. And in looking at the budget you're proposing, which I think is allowing a significant increase, maybe up to the maximum on your lab, I've researched on the PA Department of Education website statistics in the county over Amherst District and your peer groups within the county and some other schools of similar size. And what strikes me from that I'm concerned about is, generally speaking, on average, the Amherst School District spends about 30% more on an annual basis compared to your peer group. And based on academic performance measures, scores about 20% lower than your peer group. So again, just to state that, I see 30% higher cost and 20% lower academic performance. And I don't say that to offend teachers or students, because I know everybody comes to work hard every day and tries to do their best, as does the board. But to propose a budget going forward again by just increasing amount strikes me as just throwing money at a problem and hoping something might improve. And I'd like to suggest that you roll up your sleeves and do your work on the budget to certainly add things that you think are important, but don't add incremental costs to the budget without looking at what you might be able to reduce. I'm glad to see that you might have savings from the bus program, but to throw extra dollars out at a budget, increase programs, and continue to have subpar performance just seems out of sync for me. So I don't want to take up any more of your time to express that concern, but that's my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? There's no one else. We'll move on to committee reports. Education and Technology, Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will make a motion this evening accepting items 1 through 7.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Keever?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
No on 1, yes on 2 through 7.
Mr. Colwell?
Yes.
Mrs. Locker?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
We have 8 yes votes, except for 1 no on item 1.
Finance and Budget, Mr. Sassen.
Mr. President, before we can vote on the motions, we have item number 3 related to consideration of a new transportation contract between Roads and Monarch. There was a presentation just now associated with those 2 contracts. We will need some discussion and guidance in terms of how to fill in these blanks, frankly, in terms of what contract to accept and vote on.
Can I have a motion?
I would recommend that the president recognize each board member so they can express any opinions they may have on which bus company to select, rather than have someone just choose one or the other. That'd be my recommendation, Mr. President. No, it's not their vote. Some people may have strong opinions about one and not the other, or strong opinions about both, and I think the public would benefit from hearing each member articulate any feelings they may have.
Mr. Kelly, you want to go first?
Sure. Based strictly on the cost savings, I would have to say roads.
Terry?
I also will say roads based on the cost savings too. I also echo what Mr. Keever has to say in that I hope that the savings that we have is used somewhere so that we can productively use that money with our academics. I do want to state though that I am not happy with the extended contract. Again, it loses that competitive aspect that encourages the high level of service and efficiency among our outsourcing transportation contractors. So that is a concern of mine.
Rob?
In terms of contract compared to budget, I too will have to side with roads, just for the overall cost savings, but I am concerned with the $280,000 surplus that we're running in that line item and what we're going to do exactly with that money. I think from a public perspective, so the public can follow the money, we have to move or should move it or get rid of it or something so people know exactly where that money is going, not just sitting in a line item and at the end of the year all of a sudden we have a $283,000 surplus, which is a mill taxes that people didn't have to pay. So I'd like to see that number addressed, but overall roads would be my choice.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have concerns about the budget as Mr. Keeber has stated, and I also echo Mrs. Mylan's opinion about the term of the budget. But I'd also like to, as a parent in the district whose children rode the buses, we definitely need those 4 cameras on that bus. There is a provision in that contract that states that there needs to be 4 working cameras on every bus, and I would compel Mr. Rhodes, if it turns to be his contract that's awarded, to have those operational before the school year starts. This is also something that the PSBA has recommended to us to look at. So that is another issue that I think we have to say, and from the standard of customer service, if Rhodes is awarded the contract, I would like to say please step up and please service this community and make sure that our students are safe on your buses.
Mr. Sass?
Based on the financial implications to the district and a relative comparison of equipment, service, 4 cameras, etc., I would have to vote for Mr. Rhodes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
From the budgetary stance, I would have to go with Mr. Rhodes. However, I would like to add that the safer vans that Monarch was offering, I think is something that we should actually look into, maybe with Rhodes, because a lot of the vans travel on some of the back roads in our district that are not safe for buses to travel, and a little bit of extra safety I think would help out a lot. I also have a little bit of concerns with the driver pay increase of $10 today, because the district is going to foot that bill, and I really think that that should be something that the busing company should pick up, and not the school district.
I too have budgetary concerns. It is appealing because roads came in definitely lower. I think this board and also the public kind of needs to know the answer to Mr. Keeber's question, which is, and I don't think it's 280-some thousand, I think it's the 233.
We have to add in the athletics too, because there's line items in the budget for every athletic transportation need as well.
Okay,
so there's
either
additional
way,
money.
it's over $200,000, so if we will be saving this money, I would like to know where that line item will be placed. It is concerning to me. I'm tonight actually in favor of Monarch because I'm comfortable more with a company that has taken that step above the other competition, and for safety reasons alone, I have two students that ride buses daily, and the legislation that's just passed with the right to know, I don't know if most people even know this yet, but in the right to knows, now video and audio are going to be included. So if your student has a safety concern or an incident on a bus where they are either a victim or an accomplice or a perpetrator, yeah, thank you. We are supposed to provide, along with our company, these videos now, and I think that's a safety concern. I hope by the first day of school, should Mr. Rhodes get this contract, that we are up and running for safety purposes.
Mr. Anderson?
I too, based on the cost savings, which is virtually about $1 million tax a year, would have to vote for roads at this point. However, I agree that the budgetary implications, that money needs, in my opinion, needs to stay in the budget and be moved to the educational programs that we need to help increase the test scores, and that should be determined by administration, and then we should shift the monies to there so that we can help increase the test scores where they need to be increased.
Lastly, I too would have to go with roads because of the cost savings of $1.5 million. Mr. Sass, would you like to make a motion to put Mr. Rhodes on the board?
I make a motion to add to number 3, complete contract in the amount of $13,779,223 over the next 6 years, with an annual estimated cost of approximately $2.3 million. The 6-year agreement is approved by the Ambridge Area School District, subject to final contract terms being negotiated. This agreement will commence on July 1, 2016 and end on June 30th, 2022.
Second.
Wait a minute, June 30th? Is that what you said?
June 30th.
Yes.
Can I have a second? I'll second.
With that amendment, Mr. President, I have a motion to accept items 1 through 19 as presented in the agenda.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes to everything except for number 12 in light of Mr. Nikowitz's comments and Mr. Keever's comments about the transportation surplus, paying to superintendents, to business managers. No to number 12.
Mr. Keever?
Yes to all except numbers 11 and number 12.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes to everything except number 12 and number 18.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Locker?
Yes to everything except number 12.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes to everything except number 12.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes to all but number 3.
We have 9 yes votes with the exception of items 12, 11, 18, and 1 for number 3. No for number 3.
I'm sorry, one of the items does not pass.
Yeah, Renee, you mentioned the item that did not pass. Now, I believe it's number 12.
Number 12. And there was 1 for number 3. 1 no for number 3.
So all motions pass as accepted except number 3 that relates to the budget. I'm sorry, number 12, which relates to the budget. The final budget has to be approved and accepted by June 30th. So we will either need to resolve whatever questions relate to the budget or have another meeting in advance of June 30th to vote specifically on acceptance of the budget. I can share only a few items related to the budget. The budget as presented to the discussion with the board was prepared by the business office based on an inflation of the prior year budget. An actual build-up to Mr., and I apologize if I pronounce your name wrong, Bikowitz. Several members of the board attempted to build that budget up on actual costs, and the actual costs of that budget appear to be substantially different if you base it on actual cost than on the inflation of the budget items. To any surplus in the budget, as it relates, for example, to the transportation contract, those monies remain unexpended unless designated to a different line item to allow to be expended. So if the board chooses to pass a budget that has a deficit as this one does, and actual amounts and performance do not result in a deficit, there is no suitable reason or legal reason, frankly, to allow for the expenditure of monies unexpended within specific line items without oversight. So, to the discussion, this budget is the difference in view between the board and the business office relates to the preparation of the budget. both in terms of actual 15-16 estimated operations and to 16-17 budgets. That view simply is that the 15-16 budget was overly conservative in its presentation. And because the 16-17 budget is based on an inflation of that budget and not on a review of 10 or 11 months actual activities of the district, it too is inflated to some regard. That does not mean the district will expend those monies. It just means that the estimates may be significantly different between the board's view and the business office's view. I would like to be able to explain those differences in more detail. Unfortunately, the business manager is absent from this discussion, and to that end, I do not know of a timely way to build a new budget and yet meet the Pennsylvania state guidelines. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I would rather err on the side of excessive budgeting and then go back and build a budget on actual cost to what is a more realistic viewpoint, knowing that the state requires a not to exceed on the budget than it would be to go in with a number to the state that may or may not be achievable, in which case we would not be able to spend monies over that amount even if contractually obligated. Those are my only insights to the budget.
At this time, I'm going to ask each board member to give their opinion of what they want to do with this budget. Kelly?
What I want to do with the transportation.
How do you want to resolve this budget?
If we could start with figuring out what to do with that transportation surplus, that would help.
Well, what do you want to do with it?
Make sure that it's spent on educating our children.
Well, if the money's spent on education, then you're leaving it in the budget, correct? You're leaving that money in the budget? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
Okay. Terry?
At this point, and Jim, correct me if I'm stating what you said incorrectly, you're saying that the 16-17 proposed budget is inflated because we don't have a business manager, and thus the district might not expend all of those monies. So there's some sort of gamble in here because we really do not have all of the line items accurately adjusted to what our expenditures are. And again, I don't want to misstate you, I just want clarification.
No, I think that's correct. I think for clarification, the board passed the budget in totality. The ability to reallocate amounts, for example, to Mrs. Fisher's comment, is at the discretion of the administration and or board. So if there are savings considered now under the just passed transportation contract, and there are, those monies can be reallocated within a different line item, education as an example, within the authority of the administration. That would preclude or require another budgetary vote by the board.
So my opinion, and Mr. Kowal, you asked for our opinion, my opinion then is at this point, because we currently do not have an academic programmatic strategy that is aligned to the budgetary items, that we cannot definitively say that we need this tax increase. And I personally am not prepared to give our taxpayers this tax increase without knowing whether or not these monies will help to get us forward to where we want to be as a public education institute.
So what are you proposing?
I am proposing that we not increase our taxes, that we get a strategy in place so that we know what the programmatic needs of our district are, so that we can better align our strategy with the monies that we have to move us forward.
I'll offer two suggestions. One to Mrs. Fisher's point, if we reallocate that money to other certain line items to make sure that it is spent on education or other needs that this district has done away with over the years, especially for our students, like Kleenex or hand sanitizer or stuff like that. I'd rather see that money allocated there. If not, if we're going to leave that there, I would like to see our tax increase decreased by 1 mil, which is about the amount that we're going to save in that line item.
Mrs. Love.
I would like to see, and I realize, and we're voting on this in its entirety, if we're reallocating monies, because we don't know where they came from and we don't know where they're going, that the students be number one in line to get that money. I'd like to see one-to-one iPads myself, and instead of buying books, buying the software so that it can be updated. That's just my opinion. But I would agree with Mr. Kieber that I think we should look at cutting that number from 29.291, I'm sorry, 2941 mils down to 78.2941 mils, in light of the fact that we just went with a lesser expensive transportation provider.
Mrs. Keegan?
My comment is that we currently have $7 million in a fund balance that we moved into a cap project fund, and I would at the most agree to a 1 mil tax increase, but not a 3.
Kelly?
I would like to say that over the last 3 years, whether I was sitting in the audience or now as a board member, we have added to our fund balance every year. This year, we're hoping that we'll have some left over. I would like to see that money we have saved with the bus contract and remove 1 mil from this property increase.
Scott?
As I stated before, I'd like to see any savings we have from the bus contract, whatever, rolled into the educational purposes, whether that be iPads, whether that be additional staff in the classes where we need additional aides, wherever it is, I'd like to see that money moved over. I'm agreeable with the tax increase because I think we've cut educational programs too bad over the last few years, and we need to add those programs back. So any savings there is in the projected budget, we can move back into education, I'm fine with it.
I too would like to see some money put back into education, but also in favor of the tax increase, only because boards prior to this, when we built this building and every other building, they did not raise taxes, and it threw the burden on this board today. Right now, we have the opportunity to raise taxes and catch up to where we should be, and this is why I want to see the tax increase come along. I don't want to pay any more taxes than anyone else, but on the same token, I would like to see us move forward than regress. If we cut a mill of taxes, you'll never regain that mill back. Every year you lose that money, and a lot of people don't understand that, but it's just the way I feel at this point. Now, Mr. D'Imperio, you have any recommendations?
Well, we're obligated to pass a budget. We passed a preliminary budget with the information that is contained in item 12. So I was a little unprepared for this, but if there's some way that the board can make consensus with the either staying the same or cutting the 1 mil, and it can be reconsidered as a new motion this evening, I think we should try to move forward. I can say tomorrow morning, first thing, now that we've closed out the 15-16 school term, tomorrow morning, myself and all the administrators are meeting first thing tomorrow morning to plan and finalize our academic program for the 16-17 school term. And I can tell you that technology and new uses for a lot of the curriculum, like the new STEAM program and many other things, are going to be put in that program, put into that budget. So we are already there with technology and making major changes to the curriculum. So it's something that we have to come to terms with. If it's possible to come to terms with it this evening, I think it's in the best interest of the school district to do that at this time.
Jim, would you like to make a recommendation on keeping everything the same except moving some of that money over, to education?
I can,
let's try
let me summarize what I've heard in my hesitancy, and I tried to share this with the board. Much of the interpretation of whether the 15-16 school year will run at a break-even or surplus versus an estimated $1.5 million deficit was done by analyses I did on my own, in spite of information provided by our business office. Therefore, I had spoken to the board about not wanting essentially to go out as an individual on the board and say, I think we're going to run a surplus this year and therefore we might be break even next year, and then have the public and the board come back and say we did not properly address the necessary taxes to support the district. I had recommended that we do so on a conservative standpoint, not on a probable standpoint. I still am of the opinion that the actual results of the district will materially differ from the 15-16 budget, and therefore the 16-17 budget is somewhat overstated. It is my opinion, though, as an individual. The consensus I hear is a simple one. On a net basis, which means based on bad debt, you bill 100% of taxes, you do not collect 100%, because some people do not pay. Based on a net collection basis, one bill of taxes is equal to approximately $250,000. The two opinions that I hear are either to reallocate that $250,000 into educational activities, be they technology or STEAM or whatever it is, or to eliminate that $250,000 from the budget. That becomes one of what the consensus is of the board. Am I going to get hung out to dry because we took $1 million out of it because of tax increase based on the activities I did? I do not think so. Would I rather see the monies used to increase educational achievement and test scores? And you will hear this number over and over again from me, right? Our district achieved a 62.8% proficiency for math and reading. And in spite of what everybody says about the good nature of our children and the good nature of our teachers, I have to be honest with you. Money tends to buy better achievement. Better resources typically result in better achievement. And if indeed as a district we are struggling academically, and I believe we are, I would rather see the allocation of the $1 million stay in the budget, and when the budget is redefined by functional line items based on some better data from the existing business manager coming back, from some other analysis that third parties may do, I would rather see the monies expended into educational activities than just eliminated from the budget. So with that, if I stated the two opinions that I've heard come down from the 9 members, I think really it is, would you rather increase taxes by approximately 2.4 mils or 3.4 mils? If it's 2.4 mils, you're just going to reduce the budget by about $250,000 net. Or we're going to choose to approve the budget as it stands, but then go through a process and strategy, as Mrs. Myron states, to try to allocate those monies more functionally to the appropriate line items within the budget. However, that strategy obviously is going to occur over the summertime, not by June 30th. So, I mean, somebody maybe, if I've interpreted the board's discussion correctly, can somebody lean us one way or the other?
I was paying attention, but I'm sorry, it was so long-winded I lost track. So would you be able to restate that? I'm just saying. I have stated this previously.
What he's asking is leave the money in the budget where it is, and over the summer, we will reallocate that money to a different area, basically.
I don't want to see a reallocation based on an assumption. I'd like it to be known tonight that if we reallocate this money, I want to make sure that every $250,000 benefits our students directly in some way or another. That money goes directly to them in some form of either technology, iPads, whatever stuff that they need to try to increase our test scores or increase the standing of the Emory Area School District. I need a commitment, not an assumption that we'll do it at a later date. It needs to be done right here, right now.
I still go back to thinking what Mr. Nikowitz said, and that is we have 30% more spend in our costs than people in other like districts and a 20% lower academic performance. I ask myself, being on this board, what is our goal? What do we owe our students in the 13 years that we have them? And we want them to be productive citizens. And definitely having the tools and the technology is going to help that. But we also owe our taxpayers to start to align and ensure that we have this strategy in place. So I guess my opinion is that we need to significantly reduce this year and look at our costs and start to allocate our funds appropriately so that this tax increase is very, very low. I would be happy with $1 mil to $1.5 million. We cannot do this to the taxpayers, and we need to get this, the academics in line. I was dismayed at graduation that of the 176 graduates, 33% were undecided. They did not know what they wanted to do. We need to help these students, but money's not going to help them be decided.
Well, here, we need a starting point. So I'll make a motion to decrease the current millage rate by 1 mil.
I'll second.
May I offer an amendment and corresponding decrease in the budget?
So we have a motion and a second.
We do. Is there any?
Yes. Yeah. Is there any discussion?
Just to be clear, the motion is to reduce the millage increase by 1 and the corresponding decrease in the overall budget from, and we're not the business manager here, this is just, basic back of the napkin math. It would be $46,057,807 approximately.
Is that what you said?
Decrease by 1 mil. The tax increase. So it decreases by the amount of the mil.
So then the proposals prior to that, by giving $200,000 to students, just went to the wind, because now you're saying
No, it hasn't, because it could fail.
we're going to reduce it 1 mil.
First of all, the motion could fail, but secondarily, we just saved $233,000 or $283,000 based on taking the lesser expensive transportation budget.
You're just giving that $233,000 away.
No,
You're giving it away, and our kids are going to get nothing in return.
it's in there.
It's not in there. It's not going to be in there. I mean, if you want to give something back to the kids, then let's leave it as is and allocate the $200,000 to education like everybody wants. Everybody said they wanted education, now all of a sudden you're saying they reduced it $1 million. $200,000 is nothing today, people, nothing. It's nothing. Not when it comes to a $45 million budget.
You have a motion which has been seconded. I believe you have to vote on it.
Well, there could be ample time for discussion now.
But again, I think that the discussion is very narrowly defined right now in that either we're going to reduce the proposed increase by $1 million, or we're going to reallocate. We're going to leave the budget as it stands in totality, and then reallocate the savings from the transportation contract into instructional services and or technology.
There's no more discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Angus?
No.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Keeper?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
No.
Mr. Cowell?
No.
Mrs. Locker?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
No.
Mr. Sass?
No.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
We have 4 yes votes, 5 no. Motion fails.
Then I guess the alternative is
All along, we've sat here and said that we needed to put more resources into education for the students. Well, I don't like tax increases any more than anybody else because I pay them just like the rest of you. We turn around and we've saved money from the transportation budget. I honestly believe it needs to be reallocated to the upcoming academic year, whether that be the purchase of iPads, whether that be new textbooks, whether that be additional aids, as I've said before. So I would make a motion that we leave the tax increase as it is and the budget as it is after we move the $250,000 away from transportation and put it into the educational funds.
Can I have a second?
second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
No.
Mr. Keeper?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
No.
Mr. Cowell?
Yes.
Mrs. Locker?
No.
Mrs. Mylan?
No.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
We have 5 yes votes, 4 no.
Motion carries.
Motion carries.
Moving on, Mr. Brown, Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Keeper.
Mr. President, I have 3 items for approval tonight. I make a motion to adopt items number 1 through 3.
Have a second.
Second.
Roll call, please. Roll call.
Yeah, discussion, sure.
I have a question.
All right, go ahead.
The contract, is that money coming out of the 15-16 school year or the 16-17?
Well, that's up to Scott next day. I think we're trying to get that additional.
Well, that's why I asked that question to you first budget. So I was under the impression we were fine.
might be beneficial if you folks spoke into the microphone. Sorry.
Oh, we had instructed the business office to freeze the budget, not only for non-budget items, but for unexpended budgetary items. The point being the tractor that is needed for maintenance is not an approved item. So the board can either approve it for 15-16, or it can be incorporated in the 16-17 budget, or it can be approved at all.
I think we discussed that earlier in the week, and Scott came up with the idea to take it out of 15-16 budget.
According to my conversation with Mr. Sassen, there's still money allocated for 15-16 that could be used to cover the expense.
And we could have invoiced it either way.
Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Keever?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Locker?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
9 yes votes, unanimous, motion carries.
Athletics, Mr. Keever.
I have no voting items this evening, but I do have 2 points of information that are not on the agenda. One is I'd like to congratulate our boys volleyball team for another outstanding season. So congratulations to Coach Glenn Freed and his team. Again, another great season. They ended up the runner-ups at the PIAA State Volleyball Championships. The other kind of information that I have that Mr. Miller informed me of this evening before the start of the meeting, the Tribune Review just notified the school district that we have won the Tribune Review Cup. This is going to be for spring sports. We had the best overall winning percentage of all AAA teams in the WPIAL. So that's a great accomplishment for spring sports. And with that, I have nothing further, Mr. President.
Public Relations, Mrs. Mylan.
Nothing to report, Mr. President.
Steering and Rules, Mrs. Fisher.
Have no voting items this evening.
Legislative, Mrs. Kehoe.
Nothing this evening?
Salary Schedule Relation, Mrs. Locker.
We have, I'd like to move for the acceptance of item number 1.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Keever?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Locker?
Yes.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
9 yes votes, unanimous, motion carries.
Personnel, Mr. Angus.
Yes, Mr. President, I move the adoption of items 1 through 16 as amended earlier this evening.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Keever?
Yes.
Mrs. Kehoe?
Yes on item 1, no on item 2. I believe that should be a full-time person. Yes on 3 through 16.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mrs. Locker?
Yes on all items but number 14.
Mrs. Mylan?
Yes.
Mr. Sass?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
We have 9 yes votes, 1 no on item 2, and 1 no on item 14. Unanimous motion carries.
Solicitor's report.
I have nothing to report.
Superintendent's report.
Just one item, there was a modification of the school calendar. We'll have that on our website. We'll be publishing it in each of the buildings, which we're going to, and after Labor Day start for the 16-17 school term. And with that, Mr. President, that concludes my report.
That brings us to old and new business. It is now time for old and new business. Anyone from the public who desires to comment on any business relative to the Elkhorn Area School District should now come forward. Please state your name and where you live. Each person will be allotted 3 minutes. You can only speak once. We're going to have a limit of a half hour. Anybody want to come up?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board and community. My name is Mark Schmidt. I'm the president and owner of Monarch Student Transportation. Even though we were asked to Amherst Area School District in November to try to provide a better student transportation system and stay within your budget, we did that. So all I can say, we're going to continue to be a member of this community and a taxpayer. And I just want you to know that whatever I can do with my team to help this community with transportation, if you ever need our help, and Bob, if you ever need our help, or your team, call us. We're here to help any way we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Sass, I appreciate all of your work that you've done on the budget, because obviously it's fallen on your lap, considering we really don't have a business office until tonight. I want to know, where is the prepared budget? Can I see a copy of that budget as a taxpayer? Do you have a prepared?
Yes, there's a prepared budget. It was posted on the website 30 days ago.
Okay.
It's still on the website.
Has anything changed in that?
It has not.
Okay, so what is there is what we're dealing with, correct?
Correct. What the discussion is, without...
I don't want to go back over it. I'm
No,
saying,
just,
do you anticipate any changes?
Substantial changes between line items. Yes.
And when will we see those changes?
I assume not till toward the end of summer, after a business person either returns or is put in place.
Okay. And is anyone else, I mean, you're not a CPA, are you?
I am.
You are a certified public accountant. Very nice to know. Someone knew what they were doing. Okay. All right. So with that then, how are you going to allocate, what do you feel those differences are going to be? Can you state what you think the differences will be?
My conjecture, and again, it is my opinion on it, is that the $46 million is not a realistic expenditure number, that it will come in substantially less than that.
Okay.
And that the budget ultimately will be balanced on what I refer to as a structural budget. That means recurring operating expenditures against recurring revenues, exclusive of one-time items.
And you're taking into account all the salaries, the additional salaries we're paying right now?
There is the additional salaries.
Because that's a big price tag, just, you know, throwing that out there.
But the biggest assumption in the budget right now, there were two very large assumptions in the budget. One was the transportation contract, which has been resolved, and one will be ultimately the settlement of the teacher's contract and the related clerical and Act 90.
And hopefully that will get settled without issue.
Absolutely. Like there are estimates right now in the budget associated with what those negotiations might yield.
Okay.
I do not know if the actual results of those negotiations will be more money expended or less money expended than what the estimates were in the budget.
All right. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Sorry.
Okay, I got lost in the shuffle, thinking about Harmony Township. How much was our tax? Did we increase our taxes tonight? And by how much?
3.4 mils.
3.4 mils. Okay. Second question. what is going on with our superintendent that's not working? Has she exhausted her sick days yet? And it's not a personnel matter. It's a policy
The
matter.
district approved leave until June 30th. Last month, we also approved Dr. Imperio to remain in place as the substitute if Dr. Zurchin is not able to return to work on July 1st.
Is she scheduled to come back July 1st, or we don't know?
There is no approved leave beyond June 30th.
Okay. Okay. One other question. With the tax collectors, the insurance policies that they're supposed to get, I know Baden should have been, was it 3 million, 10 million? It's supposed to be a higher amount than 30,000. My question is, who gets a copy of the insurance policy? Does Baden Borough get it? Should the school district get a copy?
We do get a copy, and so does the borough.
Okay, so when it came in from 3 million and it was listed at 30,000, didn't a red flag go off somewhere?
I'm not sure what you mean by 3 million. When what came in at 3 million?
According to what I heard, and maybe it's false, but I heard the insurance policy was changed. The bond issue from, and was it 3 million? To erase and mark 30,000. So instead of spending 10,000 on the insurance, you spend 800 and pocket the other money. Didn't anybody look at that policy and go, something's wrong? I mean, that's a lot of money that we will probably never get back. Had we had that money, we might not have needed this increase at all. And the second thing, how did they get away with not paying us for so long? Who should have been on top of that?
Well, it's a pretty, Mr. Sachs with his financial background is probably as capable of explaining this as anyone else, but it was a pretty complicated looping scheme. If the charges, I guess I should add that caveat, if the charges prove to be true, that it started a number of years ago, allegedly, and basically what happens, my understanding of looping schemes is you take money that you're getting today and use it to pay money that you should have had to pay in the past. So you take money today, it's just very similar to what people would ordinarily think of as like a Ponzi scheme. You know, like I have money now that I actually should be invested in over here, but I'm actually going to pay it out like it was money from back here. And so that went on for a period of time until our business office discovered the error because the monies that we expected to receive were substantially greater than what we actually received, and that's how the process began to unravel.
And what are our chances of getting that money? Slim to none?
That's how I would characterize it.
To zero?
To zero, sir.
And do we have a business manager?
We have an employed business manager, yes, and we just hired a substitute, knowing that our current business manager is going to be out for some period of time.
Excuse me, your 3 minutes is up. Anyone else?
Bob Nicholas again. I just wanted to comment one more time on the budget process. I, again, fully, wholeheartedly appreciate the work you're doing in it, but it's somewhat disappointing at this point in the year you don't have a good sense of what your actuals are running to compare against it, as one comment from a taxpayer's perspective. And the other one is I wholeheartedly support putting savings into educational programs, but when you have a budget that's 30% higher than the rest of your peers, the last thing, honestly, I thought I'd be hearing was about how to further increase that budget by decreasing it less than you wanted to increase it. So the only suggestion I would have is if you find savings, say $200,000, for every $2 of savings that you find that might be waste, maybe only put $1 back in and apply it. Most corporations will do that when they find themselves in financial distress. So I apologize for coming back and maybe violating the rules of talking more, but my main point was I'm disappointed we have poor academic performance, but as a taxpayer, I'm outraged that we pay 30% more than your peers to get that low level of academic performance. Thank you.
Economy Borough, and you'll have to excuse me, I'm new at this, so if some of the questions sound foolish, I apologize in advance. But first of all, I'd like to say, for the next school board meeting, can we please have enough agendas for everybody to have one? It's very difficult to follow along and try to understand what's going on when there's a lot of us over there that don't have enough agendas. And this is not the first meeting I've been to where there's not any agendas. Anyway, so I'm an Ambridge graduate. My oldest daughter just finished kindergarten, so I'm new to the whole school and teaching and whatnot, but there were 25 kids in her kindergarten class. I don't understand, how is each kid supposed to get a good education when there's one teacher to 24, 25 kids in a class? I mean, maybe something that we can look at, and believe me, I understand that if we use some of that excess money that we're saving from the busing, I realize we're probably only looking at 4 or 5 additional teachers that could be hired. But what about assistants for the classrooms? What about teaching assistants? I'm sure we'd be able to get way more than 4 or 5 teaching assistants. That would be a great way for our children to benefit from that excess money that we have. And I'm really confused on the whole business manager thing. I don't know if we have a business manager, don't have a business manager, if we have one, if we're paying 2. I don't know what's going on. Same with the superintendent. Like, where is all this money going that us taxpayers are paying? Why are we paying if there are 2 business managers or there's one and a substitute? Why are we paying to have 2 business managers? We need to look at this and start being smarter with our money. This is really an injustice to the taxpayers. And people that don't come to these meetings or don't have kids in school, they don't understand what is going on. They don't know that the district is spending money left and right. Also, the last thing I want to add is I'm a realtor in the community and I do a lot of business. And I find it very sad that I talk to people that I graduated with, people that were older than me, younger than me, whatever, ones that graduated from Ambridge, and they all want to leave. They're going to North Allegheny, they're going to Seneca. I just think that's really sad. I mean, I loved it here. My teachers were fantastic. There's plenty of people out there that graduated from Ambridge that are doctors, that are lawyers, that are making a wonderful future for themselves. And I just hate for the district to be talked about so poorly. I was at a bridal shower over the weekend, and someone said, oh, I know such and such who works in the Ambridge School District. And I said, oh, what school? Oh, that's school where all the kids from the projects go to. That was the answer. That makes me really sad to hear that. I mean, I don't want our districts to be looked at like that. Please, let's do something to get, can anybody answer my questions? 1 business manager, 2 business managers, what's going on? Well, don't we have the right to know as a taxpayer, like what are we paying?
Can we answer? Yeah, I mean, you can answer if you'd like, or I can answer, it's up to you. We have a full-time business manager who is out on sick leave. Tonight we approved a part-time substitute for, what is that, it's 2 days a week.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I mean, I don't know what to say. I just wish that everybody could work together for the goal of our children. That's what it's all about. I want to raise my kids here. I have 13 plus years in this district, to bring my kids up here, and I really want to hear people start talking. You sit here, that's wonderful about the sports. It's wonderful. I played sports, my husband played sports. It's wonderful. But
Excuse me, Miss, you 3 minutes up.
let's work on improving our test scores instead of worrying about the sports.
Thank you, Jamie.
Hi, my name is Casey, Economy Borough. I too am a high school graduate of Ambridge. Know a lot of people in this room and applaud. But I just want to point out a couple of things. I come to all of the meetings, and over the years, I have watched the board bicker like it was a popcorn show. I will have to say, this newer board in 7 months talks more, brings up more questions than ever before. So, while we are very angry about things that they can't answer, which I understand for personnel reasons, which infuriates me as well, I can understand that point, but I think the majority behind me just wants to know that moving forward, that you're holding people accountable, you're checking before approving, and you're asking more questions. I think that's all they really want to know, is that you're going to do those things. Another thing is that I know we don't have a business manager, and we are picking up a lot of the slack. My taxes are going up a lot, a whole lot. But if you're going to take that money and you're going to put it back and you're going to use that principle to do that grant finding, there's grant finding out there for Apple iPads. Do it. Beaver does it. Google them. Ask them questions. I'm just saying, I know he's in the room somewhere. And then go ahead and move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey.
Anyone else? That being said, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.